Doug and I were just talking about what happened in New York on Saturday with Josh Donaldson and Tim Anderson, and you know more about the history of all the stuff that's built up with Josh Donaldson and the White Sox than anyone. So this is a tough turn to make, but what should people know as they try to process what went on there, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many factors, right? And you can easily say Josh Donaldson said that that makes him whatever you want to call it, right? It was inappropriate. Tim took it and felt something, and that's what matters, right? That was something that hit Tim Anderson in a way that made him feel lesser. And I nobody should ever condone that. And it's ridiculous that we're doing that. But I will say, I saw some, first of all, let me say this at the outset. I love Tim Anderson. I think he's a wonderful soul. I think he's great for baseball. And this is not a caveat. I just want to lay this out for people that don't know my relationship with Tim Anderson and what I think his relationship with the game of baseball is. Tim's a wonderful person who tries very hard to push baseball forward and to show who he is at all times in a land where it's good to subordinate your thoughts and feelings sometimes, and definitely what makes you unique sometimes gets buried with intent. Where Tim Anderson hits me in the heart is, I would say, and I don't have a list of this, but I would say that's not what happened is not even in one of the top 30 indignities that Tim Anderson has felt in his life. And that's the sad part for me, that Tim has this series of moments where he has felt different or felt maybe unwanted, but felt definitely unique in a clubhouse in the wrong way. And the thing that really hits you is when he says, I wasn't bothering anybody that day. Like that, a person like Tim Anderson in the game of baseball should never feel like he has to say that he wasn't bothering somebody, like to have to defend yourself against charges that you overreacted. I would challenge anybody, and I have it in my own way as somebody with a disability, but I don't know what it's like to be a Black man in America. I would challenge anybody to feel different every day and get reminded by the people who say, he's athletic but has a low baseball IQ, and we all know what that means, right? And I'm sure Tim's heard that. I would say when you have a series of indignities and things like that, the reason situations like this are so hard is because you have somebody like Josh Donaldson who believes, and he said this, that he was making a crack about an inside joke. And you have Tim Anderson, who has lived an entire life as a Black man in a game that's dominated by white people. And so you end up with somebody like Tim, who has the Lifetime Achievement Award for having these things happen. And then you have one person saying, well, I only did it once. That obviously will create conflict in a lot of ways. And I know Tim knows the feeling of, man, this all keeps happening and it's the same thing over and over again. And that's why I don't even really want to talk about Josh Donaldson when I get asked about this. It's all about Tim Anderson and the person he is. I mean, he's an upstanding member of the community who's a wonderful heart, and he's a great father, and he deals all the time with being different in a game that gets very uniform by definition. And so I don't like people at all who would ever say, whether on Twitter or in person, that he overreacted. To me, there's no such thing unless he put his hands on somebody.
Yeah, well, Jay, I mean, in that, I think that insight, you've worked for the White Sox for a long time. You've gotten to see Tim Anderson grow as a player and as a person, and really made him one of the best hitters in the game. When you look at some of these numbers, right, 325 batting average over the last 4 years, that's tops in Major League Baseball. And in an era when there's walks or OBP or the juice standard of home runs or whatever it is, you lose sight of someone that has such great bat to ball skills, such great aptitude of like knowing what a pitcher's trying to do to him, the power to right field, all these things that he's done at such a high level. So I'm curious to know what, within the framework of this, him feeling like the type of player he is, as opposed, relative to the era we're in. How much do you think that also plays a role in sort of how he perceives himself as a player? Because it's a time of, home runs and all these other things, and you forget about the Paul Molitor type style where a guy just can flat out hit.
I think there's some of that. I also think Tim Anderson has had enough home runs in big moments that I think some people who don't know his stats very well perceive him as a major power hitter. And he can be in this game. I'm not saying that he can't. But I do think, it's funny, we watch all these games and we watch 162 with a team and we scan MLB TV, but the moments always stand out. And he had the Field of Dreams home run. And he had this home run against the Tigers that we still play in our open every day. It was about a week after the whole flap with Kansas City, maybe 2 weeks after the whole flap with Kansas City and Brad Keller. He homered in a massive comeback for the Sox, and you could see all the emotion come out of him, like basically to say, see, so there, right? And then he had another one on Sunday Night Baseball where it's like, wow, he really rises to the moment. And you think about what's inside of that dude to, even when things are the worst, be better. I mean, I had a conversation with him after another error that he had about a month ago. And he is, he takes that and he says, look, he told me I'm terrible right now defensively. Like I'm really bad right now. And then we got into this conversation, and the gist of the conversation, I don't remember the exact quote, but is, this game reminds you at all times that you never have it figured out. And that's a cliche we hear all the time. But the next thing he said to me that's really interesting was he uses the bad moments as basically rocket fuel. They propel him, and they're this reminder that he needs to do more. And the way he sort of synthesizes negative moments and turns it into high octane energy to rise again to something is terrifyingly powerful. And he did it again Sunday night. Like, these moments have happened enough that I don't think it's coincidental anymore. I think he actually processes negative energy into not only motivation, but action. And I think that is a terribly thrilling skill set to watch every day, but it comes directly from his heart. I mean, he had the tragedy of losing his friend in 2018 who was shot and killed. And he's had so much his father was in prison, and they have a great relationship now, but Tim's had a lot of hurt. And so I think when people see him react to something like this, they're like, well, some people would say, here he goes again. Tim Anderson every day deals with stuff. And his reaction to this suggested to me that something beyond that happened. And then we find out it's something that's intertwined with racism. And the word, calling somebody a racist is something that puts a scarlet letter on someone. And I'm not on the field. I didn't feel it. So as a white person, I don't think I'm allowed to say who and who isn't. And Tim didn't use the word, Tony did. So I'm going to defer to them on that. But it's certainly intertwined with racism. And to me, Tim Anderson responds to things like that in a large way because he knows he's different in a game that has not really developed that type of talent very well at all.
Yeah, and I think, Jay, I think one thing about what's in a name, right? I kind of always thought about that phrase, and one summary I would describe just personally is that it's the feeling of ownership, right? It's the feeling of ownership of your space and your name, your right to be somewhere, your right to exist. And that's a very sensitive subject around being Black in America, right? And I could go through a laundry list of whatever, from police questioning me in my driveway, whatever. So, you have that feeling, but I think the name part is there's a lot of times that you feel like you're getting framed in a way to be palatable, right? All right, I don't have a lot of context for, say, Black America or intimacy, whether it's in my neighborhood or where I grew up or whatever it is. And so, just like I was Eddie Murphy for a long time, or I was whoever, like I couldn't be me. I couldn't have my name unless I grabbed it, because too often there was this need to be more palatable. The monolithic thing would kind of come out, and there was a way to feel more comfortable by saying, I know you through the context of someone famous or someone. So there's always been this battle of your name and you're owning your space, and how often it's being translated in so many different and some other terms. So I think, and Jackie Robinson, obviously as great as he is and was, Jackie Robinson was, you feel part of that through line, of course, because I don't have a career if the door is not open. And so to make your connection to him, whether you're an all-star or not, or whether you're Jackie first, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that you feel connected because you feel that experience front and center. Jackie was first. He's not last. He was not, it didn't end with Jackie Robinson. It began.
So as you say that, Doug, I just wonder, like, emotionally, how does it make you feel to have to grab your name? Like, what works inside of you as you're doing that?
I think and some of that can be figurative, but it's because you've had so many different moments where there's some slight of feeling like you don't belong here, and whatever that is, it could be, clearly I didn't even belong in my driveway when the police asked me if I was shoveling for money. Apparently I didn't even own my house. I couldn't get in the cab without someone asking me that I should take the bus or whatever it is. Now, these are examples, and I certainly have many, positive examples in life, but there's enough of these that are so prevalent around your day-to-day existence. And even if it's not happening, your lack of trust around it might happen is one thing. And let alone, you can go deep into the assault on voting rights and all these other things that have racialized implications. So you start to feel like, yeah, all right, how do I navigate this? So I think, I was at that game, and as you were as well, and calling it, and I didn't know some of the history. I knew Giolito with Donaldson, but I didn't really know. But right away I sensed something's more going on than what's happening on the field. And clearly there was.
Doug, as you're saying that, like, I'm very careful about comparing my experience to something like being pulled over by police, because that's different, or somebody being shot is even more different than this. And you start to file and say, like, are my indignities as important? And I do think the reason I can empathize with Tim Anderson is, I've been on flights before where the flight attendant, because I have a disability and I walk on the plane with a limp, they'll ask me 3 times if I can handle the exit row door. Like, that's not the same as being called something, but it makes me feel like I'm a non-human at that moment. When I was working in the minor leagues, I had never met the program director of this radio station, and we had a board operator with a disability who was not very good at his job. And I started talking about this board operator, and the program director said to me, well, he's got this disability, and you know how people like that are. They get really defensive and you can't tell him anything. Well, this guy had never met me. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, we're basically playing what's my line. He doesn't know what I do and what I am. It's not the same though, but I do know the feeling of, I just lashed out at somebody over something that they've done once, but it's happened to me 1,000,000 times. And I think that dichotomy creates conflict. It's like a warm front and a cold front coming together, and there's just a tornado in the middle, because I've felt it 1,000,000 times, and so have you, and so many people who feel different in the world, whoever that might be listening to this. And I just don't know that there's any way to get around the fact that this person's done it once, and I've felt it 1,000,000 times. I don't know what the best response is, and I don't think that's the point. The point really is not the response or the act itself. It's simply, what is it that creates these stereotypes in people where they are left judging somebody in such a broad brushstroke way that they can't get around saying something like that.
Let me ask you about something that Doug touched on. It has to do with how hard it can be to do your job. You guys are both so eloquent in just talking about the big picture. Let me ask you about the small picture of calling the game live. I was listening to this. Yasmani Grandal decides to give Josh Donaldson an earful. Bench is clear. Obviously, nobody knew then what Josh Donaldson had said to Tim Anderson earlier in that game. But you can see just watching, something is happening. So how challenging is that as a broadcaster when an incident like that busts out and you're trying to capture what's happening in that moment, but you're not 100% sure?
Yeah, I think you go on what you know at that point, and we didn't know much. We just knew the reaction, and I've seen Tim react to things before, and to be totally honest, because of what Tim has dealt with and what, when I see a reaction from him that is out of the ordinary, I tend to believe it was something deeper than, hey, I don't like you as a guy, or I don't like you as a player, or just random chirping. Because I don't think, with everything Tim has gone through in his life, I don't think he really responds that much to random chirping. Like something felt weird in my gut as Doug was talking about, but I'm not about to say that. And frankly, like I don't think that's one of those scenarios where you're just not going to know until you find out after the game. So you go with what you know, you go on the pictures, you go based on what you're seeing. I try to read lips, but that's dangerous. I read lips and process it in my mind and maybe give me a little background for what I believe was said, but I'm not going to say it in a scenario like that. But for me, it's, you go on what's in front of you, and you also understand that later you might find out something stranger, worse, whatever. And I kind of get informed by the Danny Farquhar situation we had a couple of years ago. You don't want to think the worst of a situation, but with Danny, with medics surrounding him, I was like, you know what if something really horrible happened here? We need to go on the facts, nothing beyond the facts, and then move forward from there. I don't know what was in your mind, Doug, as it happened.
Well, like you said, the information I had was the previous slide when he dove back into third and Donaldson collided. I saw that, okay, there's definitely a grudge. I knew the Lucas Giolito grudge with Donald. So, and I know Donaldson's history. So, all right, I figured there was something going on. But I think what sort of pushed it over, first of all, the way when they walked side by shortstop, that was more than a conversation. I mean, the exterior seemed in enough control, but you're physically kind of bumping up against that. But then Grandal, I said, no, there's something else going on. And I don't know if it's how things went after the slide, or so it wasn't clear. But then I saw the post-game interviews, and then so I think Jayson, to your point, was maybe the next day I had to do the Sunday game. And now it was really complicated. And we tried to touch on a little bit with John Chambi, but with radio, you're calling what you see, and so I actually didn't even try to go too deep. I mentioned something, and because there was so much going on.
Yeah, it's, as we're talking about it too, when I say that I don't want to talk about Josh Donaldson in the scenario, it's also in part because no matter how vile somebody is with their speech, you're also dealing with a human being there as well. And you're dealing with a person who's had a history and a lot of things that they've existed in, and a culture they've existed in, and everything that goes along with it. And, watching that and knowing Josh a very little bit, I just immediately thought, like, right back to Tim, because here's a guy that I know very well, and I know how much he gives to the game. And, as I'm talking about it, and if I had done the game on Sunday, I think I would have been careful not to over broadly paint Josh Donaldson, which I know would get some Sox fans angry because they want me to come and say, hey, he's a racist. He's a bad person. He can't. And like, I think he should be suspended. If Tim Anderson's going to get suspended for using the N-word as he has in the past, Josh Donaldson should be suspended as well. Like that, it's absolutely wrong behavior. But I also think, and this has happened to me, where if I over broadly paint somebody in response to what they've over broadly painted me as, I don't get a good result on that typically in my life. And so, I don't know what good it does to verbally paint somebody in an overbroad way at that point either, because I know it's not the same because he's the one that instigated it by saying something that was intertwined racially. But I also just don't think you get the best result by doing that. I mean, in law school, we had a lot of conversations about what punishment is for. You want to stop that behavior? Do you simply want Hammurabi, eye for an eye? Do you just want retribution? Like, what is the point of what we're doing to that person? And the hope is generally that you are going to change the behavior through education, through creating something better. And maybe that doesn't happen again, so we don't get in each other's lives' ways anymore. So that's where I am on that. And it's a super complicated issue and not at all made for our social media era. And I'm not trying to give a pass to somebody who did something wrong. I'm just saying, it doesn't really do any good in the long run for the best possible result in my experience. I'm good. I got like 15 more minutes if you want to. That's fine. Yeah. But this is a necessary and important conversation.
Yeah. Well, what I'd add real quick, Jay, to that is, baseball, because it's bigger than those two players on the field or any given moment, and you have a responsibility to the fans. What I think is important in what would be kind of a pivot from, the way you might handle controversy that you want to go away eventually, is to embrace it and actually educate people and help people become more informed around the issue. That's the opportunity. And look, I've said for years, sometimes to the clouds, that baseball or the Players Alliance, they need a chief academic officer. They need someone to actually distill and help, because the fans are sitting there just like I feel like, oh, that's a reminder of snow shoveling. Think about all the other fans on the south side of Chicago that are going through something right now because there's no information. So I do feel that is the opportunity. Like Josh Donaldson, whatever, get 3 days, 2 days, 7, whatever. I don't know how material that is, but what is material is the opportunity you have with people that are open, and maybe Josh Donaldson is open to learning something, and that the game can help provide some good positive takeaways. That's where I think the game should really focus on, not so much about, like you said, the punitive side of it. Education is the opportunity.